I found out the truth on an ordinary afternoon. No argument, no warning, just a quiet sentence spoken too carefully. I was sitting at the kitchen table, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. My sister sat across from me, not looking at my face. She kept folding her hands, then unfolding them again. Before she spoke, I felt it. That slow, heavy feeling in your chest when something is about to change forever. "There's something you should know," she said. People say that right before the world shifts. I listened, nodding, telling myself I was ready. But when the words came, they did not sound real. They felt like they belonged to someone else's life. I did not cry. I did not speak. My mind traveled backward instead, to family dinners where I felt slightly out of place, to birthdays that felt quieter for me than for others, to hugs that were warm but never held too long. All my life, I believed the distance I felt was my fault. I thought I was too quiet, too sensitive, too easy to overlook. But sitting there, staring at the table between us, I realized something that took years to understand. What if the distance was not imagined? What if it was built on a secret I was never meant to hear? That day, memories began to rearrange themselves. Silences finally had meaning. Questions I never asked suddenly mattered. The people who raised me loved me. I know that now. But they loved me while carrying a truth they were afraid to speak. And once a truth like that enters your life, you cannot return to who you were before. This is not a story about anger or blame. It is a story about belonging, about silence, about learning who you are after discovering who you were never told you were. And it all began with one quiet sentence that changed everything.
Greetings, dear listeners. Before I begin my story, I ask you to support this channel. Please subscribe and hit the like button. It helps stories like this be heard. And write in the comments what city or country you are listening from. It always warms my spirit to see how many of us there are. And now, enjoy the story.
The day I learned my family's biggest secret about me all along. The day I learned my family's biggest secret about me, I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not even ask why. I was sitting at the kitchen table, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy in your chest. Outside, rain tapped softly against the window, like it was afraid to disturb the truth that had just been spoken. I remember thinking how strange it was that the world kept moving, even though something inside me had stopped. All my life, I believed I knew who I was. I believed I knew where I belonged. I believed my family loved me in the same simple way I loved them. But that afternoon, with one sentence spoken too calmly, I realized I had been living inside a story that was never fully mine. My sister sat across from me. Her hands were folded. Her eyes could not meet mine. And when she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost careful. "You were never supposed to know," she said. That was the moment I understood. Not everything, but enough. Some secrets do not arrive like a storm. They arrive like a whisper, and by the time you hear them, they have already changed your life. I grew up believing I came from an ordinary family. Not perfect, but warm. The kind of family where dinners were loud and Sundays smelled like cooked rice and tea. My mother was a gentle woman. She believed silence could fix most problems. My father was quiet, steady, and always tired from work. I was the middle child, not the loudest, not the favorite, but dependable. I learned early how to make myself useful. I helped in the kitchen. I listened instead of speaking. I learned how to sense moods without being told. I thought that was love, doing your part, not asking for too much. Growing up, I never questioned my place. I had a room, I had clothes, I had food. And yet, there was always a feeling I could never name, a small distance I could not cross, a warmth that stopped just short of me. At family gatherings, my cousins leaned into hugs that lasted longer than mine. My mother smiled at me, but her eyes softened differently when she looked at my siblings. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself love looks different for everyone. As years passed, I married, raised children, and built a life of my own. Still, I returned home often. Still, I showed up when they needed me. Because even if something felt missing, I believed family was something you stayed loyal to. The signs were always there. I just did not know how to read them. Old photographs disappeared. Questions were answered with half smiles. Stories changed slightly each time they were told. Whenever I asked about my early childhood, my mother would say, "You were such a quiet baby," and then quickly change the subject. My father avoided those conversations altogether. He would clear his throat. He would stand up. He would leave the room. I told myself they were private people. I told myself not everything needed to be explained. But sometimes, late at night, I would lie awake wondering why I felt like a guest in my own family, why praise came easily for others but rarely for me, why mistakes I made were remembered longer. One afternoon, my sister and I were cleaning out old boxes in the storage room. Dust floated in the sunlight. Memories slept inside cardboard. She picked up a faded envelope and froze. Her face changed. "What's that?" I asked. She shook her head. "Nothing important." That was when my chest tightened, not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. The truth did not come in anger. It came in exhaustion. A week later, my sister asked me to come over. Just us. No children. No noise. She made tea, but did not drink it. Her hands trembled slightly. "There's something you should know," she said. I waited. She took a breath that sounded like a goodbye. "You were adopted." The word hung in the air, quiet and heavy. Adopted. I felt strangely calm, as if my heart had been preparing for this moment all my life. But then she continued. "You were adopted within the family," she said. "You were my aunt's child." The room felt smaller, the walls closer. "She couldn't raise you," my sister whispered, "so our parents took you in, but they never planned to tell you." I stared at the table, at a small crack in the wood I had never noticed before. I thought of every moment I felt different, every silence, every unanswered question. It all made sense now. I did not confront my parents that day. I went home. I sat in my car for a long time. Grief is strange. It doesn't always come with tears. Sometimes it comes with understanding. I realized my parents did love me, but they loved me with fear, fear of losing me, fear of the truth. They thought hiding it would protect me. They didn't see how the silence shaped me instead. Weeks later, I spoke to my mother. She cried quietly. "We wanted you to feel safe," she said. I held her hand, and for the first time, I felt like we were being honest. I'm still learning who I am, still learning that love does not disappear because the truth appears. Some families hide secrets to survive, but healing begins when silence ends. I am not broken by the truth. I am completed by it. And now, when I look in the mirror, I no longer ask where I belong. I know. Sometimes the hardest truths do not destroy us. They finally give us permission to understand ourselves. After I learned the truth, the world did not change. People still went to work, children still laughed outside, phones still rang. But inside me, something shifted. I noticed everything more. The way my mother paused before saying my name, the way my father avoided my eyes when I visited, the way family conversations felt carefully measured. I began replaying my childhood in my mind, slowly like an old film. Moments I once thought were small suddenly felt heavy. I remembered school events where my parents arrived late for me but early for my siblings. I remembered how my achievements were acknowledged quietly while others were celebrated loudly. I remembered how I learned to comfort myself without realizing it. None of it felt cruel, but none of it felt accidental anymore. At night, I lay awake thinking about my birth mother, my aunt, the woman I had known all my life but never truly known as my beginning. She had passed away years ago, and now there were questions that would never be answered. I asked myself a simple question again and again. Who am I? For years, I had shaped myself around a family story that was incomplete. I had learned to be grateful, to not take up too much space, to accept love quietly. Now I wondered if I had done that because some part of me always knew. There's a special kind of loneliness that comes from realizing you were loved but not fully trusted with the truth. I did not feel anger toward my parents. I felt sadness for the years lost to silence. Sometimes I stood in front of the mirror and searched my face. I wondered which features came from my birth mother, which habits, which fears. I felt like a puzzle piece that finally understood why it never fit perfectly. A month later, I visited my father alone. We sat on the porch, listening to birds. "I never meant to hurt you," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. "We were afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you'd leave." I thought about that for a long time. "I was already leaving," I said gently, just slowly, without knowing why. He nodded. His eyes were wet. That was the moment I realized something important. Secrets do not just protect the people who keep them, they shape the people they are kept from. One afternoon, I asked my sister for old letters, the ones my parents had hidden away. She hesitated, then handed me a small box. Inside were letters written in careful handwriting, my birth mother's handwriting. She wrote about fear, about love, about wanting me to have a better life. She never wrote my name. She called me my little one. I cried for the first time since learning the truth. Not loudly, just quietly, like someone finally allowing themselves to feel. Grief is not always about death. Sometimes it is about lost understanding. I grieved the version of myself that never knew, the child who thought she was simply not enough, the adult who stayed quiet to keep peace. But I also felt something unexpected: relief. The confusion I carried for decades finally had a shape, a reason. I was not broken. I was shaped by silence. Slowly, I began speaking differently to my family, more honestly, more gently. I stopped trying to earn love. I stopped shrinking myself. I realized family is not just who raises you, it is also who tells you the truth, even when it is hard. My parents did their best with the tools they had. Fear guided them. Love followed, but quietly. Forgiveness came to me not as a decision, but as a natural breath after holding too much inside. I am still learning how to hold two truths at once: that I was deeply loved and deeply protected from myself. Both can exist. The silence shaped me, but it does not define me anymore. And as I began to understand my past, I realized the greatest work was still ahead of me: learning how to live freely with the truth. After the truth settled into my life, I noticed something gentle begin to happen. I stopped rushing my feelings. I allowed silence to exist without fear. I did not need answers for everything anymore. Some things could remain unfinished and still be whole. When I visited my family, I no longer watched myself from the outside. I spoke when I wanted to speak. I rested when I felt tired. It was not rebellion, it was permission. I realized that for most of my life, I had been waiting for someone to tell me I belonged. Now I understood that belonging could begin with me. My mother and I started having small conversations, not heavy ones, just honest ones. She told me stories she had never shared before, about the night they brought me home, about how afraid she was of failing me. "I loved you the moment I held you," she said, "but I did not know how to love you with the truth." I believed her. Love is not always brave. Sometimes it is careful. Sometimes it hides. That does not make it empty. It makes it human. I visited my birth mother's grave for the first time as her daughter, not as a niece, not as a visitor. I stood quietly. The wind moved the trees gently, like a breath. "I'm okay," I whispered. "You did what you could." I did not feel anger. I felt connection. I carried her inside me in ways I was only beginning to understand. In my patience, in my sensitivity, in my quiet strength. For years, I thought I had to earn love by being easy to keep, by not asking too much, by staying quiet. Now I see how that belief was born. It was not weakness, it was adaptation. But I no longer need to adapt to survive. I am allowed to exist fully. I am allowed to take up space. This realization did not come with fireworks. It came like a warm morning light, slow, certain. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting. It meant understanding without bitterness. My parents are older now. Their fear has softened. Their love speaks more clearly. We don't pretend the past didn't happen. We also don't live inside it. The truth lives among us now, quietly, honestly, and that's enough. If there is one thing this journey has taught me, it's this. You can love the people who raised you and still honor the truth of where you came from. You can grieve what you did not receive and still be grateful for what you did. You can forgive without losing yourself. The day I learned my parents' biggest secret about me was not the day I lost my place. It was the day I finally found it. Sometimes the truth doesn't break us. It frees us. And sometimes belonging begins when we stop waiting for permission and quietly give it to ourselves.